When you're making your own D&D homebrew setting, or even designing your own tabletop role-playing game, knowing the genre you're trying to evoke goes a long way toward informing your design decisions. And now, there are too many genres out there to possibly go through them all, from science fiction to fantasy and action and drama and romance. So instead, this video is going to zoom in on one of my favorite subgenres. It's when you take horror movies and action movies and put them together. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and this week we're going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be stepping into the background, and I'm going to let some of the visuals from some of my favorite games and movies really take center stage. So let's dive in to action horror as a genre. Horror stories, put simply, play off our fears. The fear of being watched, the fear of the unknown, the fear of monsters. They startle us, shock us, fill us with a mounting sense of dread. They're often designed to make us feel a sense of hopelessness, of doubt that everything will be okay, that the characters will make it through the story unfazed, let alone alive. The stakes are often intimate and personal, involving the survival of just one person or maybe a small group of people. The final girl attempting to avoid the serial killer, the doomed crew scrambling to understand and kill a single hostile alien life form. The consequences for failure in horror games are often harsh and gruesome. Your life hangs in the balance with every decision. Every shot matters, and one slip-up means losing life, limb, or sanity, or loading your last save file. It's not dissimilar in tabletop role-playing games. Games like Dread play off that sense of inevitability. Call of Cthulhu makes you feel weak and fragile in the face of Lovecraftian horror. You know it's not likely that you'll make it out alive. Such games often focus on smaller narratives, focusing on a single session story, or maybe up to 3 or so max, because of that inevitability of the character's demise. Some folks wonder why people enjoy horror. Do they like being scared? Well, yeah. The tension, the dread, and the eventual payoff are the whole point for those that enjoy horror. In games, it's the process of overcoming that horror, eking out victory with the slimmest of margins, that makes them so satisfying to play. Sorry to interrupt. Just popping in to say, if you're liking this so far, consider hitting the like button and maybe subscribing. Or if you really like to get more content, hop into the Tales from Elsewhere Discord server or become a patron on our Patreon page. Patrons get an additional video every week where I deep dive into the subject of the prior week's video, explaining what I cut, what I wanted to add, and going through some of the comments. Anyway, sorry for the interruption, let's get back to it. And on the other hand, action stories, whether they're movies or games, feature a fast pace, big set pieces, and lots of dynamism and movement. There are dramatic fistfights, big shootouts, death-defying car chases. There's an escalation of explosiveness, of intensity, that is just such a pleasure to experience. With action stories, the point is the violence. It's the fighting. It's why so many are mocked for having weak narratives. They don't understand that the narrative is told through the fights, through the adventure. We're here to watch Arnold mow down a legion of bad guys with his unlimited ammunition and grenades that kill just one person in one shot, then blow up a whole building in another. It's about badasses doing badass things. The hero may get shot, but it'll always be mere grazes or flesh wounds that they kinda just ignore. The hero in an action movie is always going to win, right?
Wrong.
And that's where we get the clue as to what makes action horror different. Ah, action horror, my beloved. Oh, how I love your action and your horror. So what makes this subgenre what it is? Action horror takes the high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled heroes of an action movie and places them into impossible situations, into stories where their survival is not guaranteed. We are questioned if they are, in fact, badass enough to endure what's in store. The key aspect here is that, unlike a horror story, the characters in action horror can truly fight back. They can be the aggressors at times, taking the fight to the horrors that stalk them. The question isn't whether or not they can fight back, like in a horror story. It's whether or not it will be enough. And this has a number of knock-on effects. The more badass the heroes are shown to be, the more terrifying their foes become if they are truly threats to the protagonist. When it may simply not be enough, the horror starts to creep in. And this works in video games and tabletop games as well. In action horror games, you, the player, get to feel like that hero. You get to blow up zombies, gun down mutated abominations, and punch boulders. You don't run and hide from every engagement, but fight your way through the droves of monsters that beset you. One super clear example of the difference between horror and action horror comes from Alien and Aliens. In Alien, Ripley and the crew of the Nostromo are hapless bystanders, caught in the machinations of a sinister android and a hostile alien life form that now stalks their ship. They're not the aggressors for most of this film. They're ill-equipped and in the dark on what they face. They get picked off one by one. Ripley, the only human survivor of the crew, only escapes by the skin of her teeth. Aliens is a very different vibe. Ripley and the Marines she travels with have detailed knowledge on what they face. Ripley knows their behaviors, their weaknesses and strengths. She knows everything she needs to guide those Marines on a successful bug hunt. Or so they think.
Game over, man! It's game over!
The horror comes in when the Marines, despite their awesomeness, become overwhelmed by the xenomorph nest they encounter. The unlimited legions of these creatures, combined with close quarters and unreliable technology, results in heavy casualties. The question becomes, can they make it off the planet rather than can they eradicate these bugs? The characters' relationships to the threats they face are different, and the tools and methods they use to face them are also different. Compare Ripley's desperate gamble to get to the escape pods in Alien to her epic battle with the xenomorph queen at the end of Aliens. That's the difference between horror and action horror. And continuing this trend of talking about my favorite films of all time, we're going to talk about Predator. In Predator, Arnold and his commandos are shown to be well-equipped, capable, confident, and goddamn sexual tyrannosauruses.
Just like me.
They're all quips and one-liners, classic 80s action movie stuff. They tear through the guerrilla fighters' camp like butter. They shrug off any wounds with lines like,
I ain't got time to bleed.
But then, a discovery is made. The mutilated remains of the soldiers they were sent to save, carved up, decapitated. Something isn't quite right. Throughout their excursion, something has been watching them, studying them, hunting them. And that's when this movie shifts into action horror mode, with our badasses suddenly becoming the prey. Their one-liners disappear, their joviality gone. They start being brutally killed, their bravado melting away in the face of a deadly and advanced alien threat. Nonetheless, Dutch, Arnold's character, faces his foe man-to-man in a very action movie sort of way in the finale, not really in a horror movie way. He literally gets into a knife fight with a giant alien headhunter. The film even adds a giant nuclear explosion at the end. I love this movie. In video games, I think one of the most stark examples you could look at would be Resident Evil 1 versus Resident Evil 4. In Resident Evil 1, you're squarely in that horror space. Your fight is desperate, and you spend more time fleeing from foes than really fighting them. You have too few resources to stand and fight. Not enough bullets, bandages, medical herbs, and so forth. You have to be cautious. You have to be careful. In Resident Evil 4, it couldn't be more different. Rather than sneaking through a manor, you're fighting your way through cities overrun with infected people, blasting and punching everything in sight. You face these horrifying foes, and sure, you can be torn to pieces if you're not careful in appropriately gruesome ways, but at the end of the day, you're still the aggressor here. And it's that wonderful subgenre that I've loved for many, many years that inspires my design decisions in Tales from Elsewhere. A feeling of capability, of badassness, but tempered heavily by a sense of mortality. That you may not return to town with all your limbs, or even your life. That a story of your characters being the aggressors in a scenario could suddenly shift at any moment due to one grisly discovery, like in the movie Predator. I think it's a truly special feeling, that combination of action and fear. It's probably my favorite genre of film and video games and tabletop games. The victory of the heroes is all the more meaningful when the forces they face are truly horrifying, when the cost of failure is so high. That's when the real heroes are revealed. Alright, thanks for watching. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It was really a trip down memory lane in some of my favorite movies. And if you have some favorite action horror movies you'd like to recommend, definitely put them in the comments. I'm always on the hunt for more. And if you liked this different style of presentation that I did in this video, also let me know. I'm always interested in maybe experimenting with how I'm presenting information, as at the end of the day, it's just about getting information to you, the viewer, in the best way that you can enjoy it. So let me know. And I hope to see you here next week on Tales from Elsewhere.